My pleasure to welcome you to this wonderful online training, the Science of Community Water Fluoridation and Fact-Based Advocacy. I'm Gary Harbison. I'm the Executive Director of the Missouri Coalition for Oral Health, and we're going to do a more formal introduction for Dr. Johnson in a moment, but I just wanted to make a couple of remarks. This is, in fact, a part of the Missouri Coalition for Oral Health lecture series. It's an occasional lecture that we provide outside of the annual conference space on topics important to oral health and to our mission of improving Missouri oral health. I think most of the people on here know about the coalition. But for those of you who do not, I want to encourage you to go to our webpage. You can look us up on Google, just search Missouri Coalition for Oral Health, and you'll find us quite easily. You can find a lot of information about us, including other trainings that we're doing, and it's a good place to stay up to date. And we also want to encourage you to consider joining the coalition if you're not already a member. There's a link online to do that. And, I would say the coalition, with the numbers of members that we have from around the state, including dental professionals and many other community members who are interested in community oral health, we've been able to accomplish a lot in a few short years, including passing some fluoride supportive legislation. We passed a bill that requires notification of the water customers and the state, the Department of Natural Resources, which has regulatory authority, and the Department of Health and Senior Services, which is much more interested in the public health aspects of community water fluoridation. That has been working to good effect. It prevents antis from going in and quietly convincing a local decision-making body to discontinue community water fluoridation without public input. We don't think that's good local government, and we think that the bill that we passed in the Missouri legislature has been very helpful for that. We've done other things. We supported the passage of legislation to allow teledentistry to happen here. We worked really hard several years ago to make sure that the state actually had a dental director, and we do. Dr. Dane is the current dental director. He does a fantastic job and has many, many great projects going on, and he's brought new money into the state that wasn't here before. So we consider that part of our success. And more importantly, he gets data. Our strategy has always been the Public Health Authority ought to be doing data on oral health, and they do a very fine job at that. And then finally, we passed reinstatement of adult dental coverage in Missouri Medicaid. We're looking forward to seeing that carried over to the Medicaid expansion population. As I'm sure you all know, Medicaid expansion was passed at the August vote by Missouri, and so we're looking for that. A couple of housekeeping things. We have muted everyone's audio and video except John Dane, apparently. Here's Dr. Dane. As you come in, most people are muted. And we will take questions probably at least a couple of times during the presentation and after the end. And we'll probably have you pose those mostly through the chat, because we do have a number of registrants today that talking and all the mics and stuff, usually there's quite a bit of interference with that. And I think that is all that I can think of. Ashley may have a few other things. So I'm going to turn it over to Ashley, and she will introduce Dr. Johnson. I just want to say that he is the national leader on community water fluoridation. He's very dynamic, and he's an all-around great person. And I really enjoy working with him. And if you haven't heard him speak before, you're in for some fun. He texted me earlier and said props were involved. I think he was probably joking, but you never know. So I'll turn it over to Ashley. Ashley Herman is the Coalition's Community Outreach and Project Development Director, and she does a lot of great things for us, and she has taken a load off of me because she's helping with the the technology today. So I'm going to hand it over to Ashley. You have the floor.
Thank you, Gary. Before I introduce Dr. Johnson, the CE information will be given at the end of the webinar, so you will have to stick around to the end in order to get your verification code that you'll need for CE Zoom. With that, I would like to introduce our presenter today is Dr. Johnny Johnson. And Dr. Johnson is a pediatric dentist from Pinellas County, Florida, and he's also the co-founder and president of the American Fluoridation Society. Dr. Johnson has delivered presentations, training, and testimony about fluoride in numerous states, including Kansas, New York, Pennsylvania, Texas, Wisconsin, and his home state of Florida. He's also done this in the UK and Canada as well. Dr. Johnson's leadership role in fluoridation advocacy began after his county commission voted to end fluoridation to over 700,000 residents, a decision that was successfully reversed after he worked with others to form a coalition in the Clearwater, St. Petersburg, Florida area. Dr. Johnson was a key source of information for the reporters and editors who helped the Tampa Bay Times win a Pulitzer Prize for its coverage of the fluoridation issue. He received his dental training from the University of Florida and earned his certificate in pediatric dentistry and Masters of Science from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. With that, help me welcome Dr. Johnson. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you all very, very much for having me. I will tell you all that the way I began in this was very by accident. never planned on doing anything like this, but I became disabled to practice in 2009 from a bicycle accident. My wrist is totally fused. I can't bend it anymore, and I'm right-handed. But I'd done my background work in fluorides and infant formula for my master's work at UNC, and it was kind of like I got stepped up and got angry when my county commissioners stopped doing it. 4-3, they voted it out, and I was like, well, no, not on my watch. I have ADHD, anxiety disorder, and a little bit of depression, underlying depression, which you get when you have ADHD all your life. So I put my pants on one leg at a time like everybody else does, and I prefer to be called Johnny. But Dr. Johnson takes too long to get out, so we can rock and roll. I do want to also compliment Gary and the rest of the folks with the coalition. You all have one of the strongest oral health coalitions of any state that I've worked with, and we've worked with all the states. Our group, American Fluoridation Society, is a complete nonprofit organization. We don't take any pay for anything that we do. If we get a honorarium for speaking, it goes right into AFS so that we can turn around and help communities. Like we traveled to Festus a couple years ago and tried to keep fluoridation there. But that's another story, and it's not over. We didn't lose. We have suffered a setback, and so we never lose. And that's really frustrating to the opponents. So
I remembered. Can I interrupt for a quick second here,
yes.
John? I remembered one very important thing I wanted to mention. This training is sponsored by the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services, Office of Dental Health. So thank you to everyone with the Office of Dental Health at the state for doing that, and especially to Dr. Dane, who is online with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Well, without further ado, I will go ahead and begin the presentation here. We practiced this before. You all got on, and here we go. Okay. Let me move this over a little bit. There we go. So what I'm going to go through is to really kind of take an approach that is one that I love doing, which is helping others to learn what I didn't learn in school, what I did not know about water fluoridation. We learned, and I graduated from dental school in 1983 and my residency in 1985, and water fluoridation was growing across the country. We knew it was great. And we got out thinking that everybody was going to be doing it, and would be happy. And my mentor at UNC said, Johnny, you got to watch out for the opponents, the anti-fluoridationists, because they're going to be working to get it out. And I thought, Jim Baldwin was his name. God love him. He's passed away years ago. But I thought, you got gray hair, you're kind of a little worrywart, and that's not the case. Well, dang it, if he wasn't right. He absolutely was right. And it's something that I love doing. I'm a brat, and it's something that allows me to be a brat for a good reason. So I'm going to go through water fluoridation, how we really look at the science, how we look at the safety and the effectiveness of it, and kind of just boil this all down from how we found out about it to where we are today. And then we'll get into having some fun about what claims are made against it. And also, I'm going to go off record to be able to present to you an advocacy piece. So that's the very last part. Let me go ahead. Come on, slide. Do a thing here. There we go. Let me get on this page here. Now I will move. All right. That's me when I was running for office back in 2014 as county commissioner. That's me on the right side. What I do with when I'm not doing this is out on my property, taking out feral hogs. Those are Russian boar hogs that somebody set loose years ago, and they are now up in your area. I have no financial disclosures to make on anything with this presentation or otherwise. One of the first things that you will see and we'll get into when you discuss community water fluoridation, and really this all falls back on those that oppose it. They make it sound like we began dumping something into water in 1945 because we couldn't get rid of it any other way. Well, we got to take a look back at the history of how we discovered fluoride in the United States in 1901. A dentist, he graduated from dental school and moved out west, and he opened his practice. Well, fluoride is the 13th most abundant mineral in our Earth's crust. It's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. Almost all water has fluoride in it, including ocean. The ocean water has up to 1.4 parts per million, twice as what we have in our fluoridated water systems. But so it's usually in our water systems, surface and wells, not at a level high enough that actually helps prevent cavities. But when Frederick McKay was his name, graduated from school, he opened practice in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And he saw on people that were born there or came in as infants that they had this brown stain on their teeth. And they called it mottling back then. And they couldn't figure out what it was. It wasn't something that came off easy. Something that didn't come off easy when they tried to clean the teeth. They couldn't really have any impact on it. And he called us instructors and said, what's going on? They were like, yeah, well, you did graduate well in your class, but we think you're kind of crazy. Well, he also noticed that these folks had very few cavities. And if you're thinking in 1901, very few cavities, that was unheard of. Well, he finally, through his persistence and through getting G.V. Black, who was the father of silver filling design, and then H. Trinley Dean, who was the first director of the Public Health Service, as it's now called. He got them involved in it, and they actually went out and started studying it. And they looked at areas around Colorado Springs, and all they could see that the people were doing the same was drinking out of the water. That was the common denominator. They found areas around Colorado Springs that had areas that had dark stained teeth also. And they, at one point, decided, well, let's suggest they get water from a different spring. And they did, and the kids started growing up without stains. They said, well, there's got to be something in the water. And they tested it, and there was nothing different that they could find. The only issue was there wasn't a fluoride probe that was on the market back at that time. They did not have one, so they couldn't really know what it was. Well, around 1930, a fluoride probe was invented that they said, okay, let's send this water to them and see what's in it. Because as they were investigating and going around with their research around the country, they saw areas that had very few cavities, but maybe a few little white streaks. And I see the gingivitis here too. We got to ignore that. That's not from the white marks on the teeth. But they saw only under a bright light, that dental lights and drying off the teeth, they would see these white marks on the teeth. But these folks had very few cavities too. So, well, when this fluoride probe got invented, they tested the water in the areas where the teeth looked good, few cavities, and they found that the fluoride levels was right around 1 part per million. And out in Colorado Springs, their water supply was between 2 and 12 parts per million. People were healthy, both places. Nobody had a third eye or head on backwards or anything like that. So there was no health implications whatsoever, except, like a lot of things, at a low amount, there's benefits, and at a higher amount, there could be some side effects. And the side effect of a higher amount was this mottling. It began to be known as they were working, as they called it, dental fluorosis. At the time that water fluoridation was initiated, it wasn't at all uncommon for people over the age of 65 in my age range to have lost all their teeth. Recruits in World War II is pretty impressively sickening that they had to have 6 teeth, 3 on top and 3 on bottom, that matched each other to chew, or else they couldn't provide their nutrition for themselves in the war. So there was about a 10% rejection rate, and 40% needed immediate relief. That's a homeland security issue I want to get y'all to keep in the back of your minds. And almost everybody had cavities back when water fluoridation began. Well, what was done, once they found the level that was good and small white marks on the teeth, no issues whatsoever, and not marks that you would notice. These are not something you would go, aha, look at that person walking down the street. Look at those white marks on their teeth. Well, they got through the 4 cities, 8 cities altogether, 4 cities across the U.S. and Canada that agreed to adjust their natural amount of fluoride in their water up to 1 milligram per liter, and then had 4 control cities that remained with just, they didn't fluoridate them up to 1 part per million. They left it at their background levels, which was around 0.2.
Okay. Can you all hear me now?
We've got you again, Johnny.
Okay. For some reason, my phone just said goodbye.
Oh, no.
Okay. So let me get back. There we go. Okay. So we had the 4 cities. Did y'all hear 4 cities that were test cities and 4 that were not adjusting their fluoride levels? And at that point in time, what happened was, after a few years went by, the cavity rates were just falling dramatically in this test cities, and they came down so fast and so quickly that some of those control cities said, forget it, we want it, let's knock it off. And when you have something that's been shown to be safe and effective and not have any side effects at an amount like this, it's a public health study, you cannot deny people from getting it. And it's essentially the same as people are passing away, and you have penicillin, so you do a test on half of the ones that are sick and dying, and they recover, and you don't give it to the other ones and are not recovering. You cannot withhold something that you know is effective and safe from everyone. So a lot of the cities jumped off, but 1 or 2 stayed on the entire 15 years. So we knew what was causing the cavities to be reduced was fluoride in the water. That's important. The history is, because when you're in front of people and you're talking about fluoridation, the history is something that they have never thought about, and the decision makers have never thought about. And the second thing is, they don't even think about it being in the water naturally. When they hear that, it's like, wow, I didn't know it was already in there. So those are some really important points to make, and that's why I always start every presentation, whether I'm doing something like this or if I've got 15 minutes in front of the city council to defend water fluoridation at their meeting, I'll always put in the history part, and that fluoride is already in the water, and all we're doing is kicking it up a smidge, up to 0.7 parts per million. Well, let's look at how water fluoridation works. what it is and why it matters to us. Water fluoridation is simply the adjustment, as I said, of the natural amount of water fluoride that's in the water and to a level that we know reduces tooth decay and promotes good oral health, and that's 0.7 parts per million. Many places can have up to 16 parts per million. Most don't. We have about 200,000 people in the U.S. that have fluoride levels that are above 4 parts per million, which is considered the maximum that the Environmental Protection Agency will allow people to drink. You're really not supposed to drink it, but they do. They get ugly teeth, they get married, they have children, and everybody in the town looks the same. But they're healthy. The way that fluoride works is we used to think back when I was in school that it was systemic, that it was only getting into the teeth that was going to give you lifelong benefits while the teeth were developing under the gums. We came to know later through studies that actually the topical effect of fluoride in the water plus in toothpaste and rinses and foods was giving us a greater benefit than what the systemic was, but both of them together are making the teeth harder from the inside out and then coating the teeth constantly with a low level of fluoride. So both mechanisms are needed to allow the teeth to develop properly and as cavity resistant as possible. Again, think of it when you hear, well, fluoride works primarily from the outside of the tooth. Well, that's true because fluoride is getting on the tooth as we drink fluoridated water. It's also getting onto our mucosa, onto our tongue, and it's on all surfaces of our mouth. It's also in toothpaste. It's very concentrated. You're talking about 1,500 to 1,800 times what it is in fluoridated water. That's a high concentration. Fluoride levels in the mouth stay mixed with the saliva for about 1 to 2 hours at a high level, then it falls back off at a low level. Systemically, that tooth is developing inside of the children's gums up to the age of 8. The permanent teeth are developing, and they're absorbing the fluoride into forming a harder crystal to help prevent cavities and not dissolve as easily with the acid attack from plaque. We also have found out that adults benefit rather only than just children, which we used to think it was only kids. In fact, it's adults probably, I would say, benefit more than kids. And people look at you kind of cockeyed like, what? Well, we're adults longer than we are kids. And as an adult who's taking care of his teeth well, grew up in a non-fluoridated area, but I have gum recession, root surfaces. We know the root surfaces are not as hard as the structure on the enamel of our teeth, and we get cavities much easier on the softer root surface. And for anyone that's ever had to chase a cavity around the back side of a molar with the 3 roots on that tooth, God made a better surface and a better intact area than we can ever get a filling to stick in. And that's a big reason why a lot of adults at my age, at 64 and older, we will lose some of our teeth because of root surface cavities. Water fluoridation helps to reduce those. Fluoride helps to work in ways that when people have, whether on myself, I'm on a variety of medications for ADHD, a little bit of cholesterol, a little bit of high blood pressure. A lot of these things make you have a dry mouth. There's other issues that go along with giving your mouth less saliva as time goes on. Systemic fluoride from the saliva, taking it up into the permanent teeth when they were developing, plus the topical concentration of fluoride in the mouth being raised, all helps to keep us from getting cavities. And that's especially in folks that if you've ever worked with someone with radiation therapy for cancer, when a salivary gland's been blasted with radiation and they have a very low level of saliva flow to help buffer the acids from plaque, and they will end up with a mouthful of cavities. So fluoride is a great benefit for many, many things other than just cavities that we normally would get. By simply drinking fluoridated water, turning on the tap and using it, cooking with it, everybody will get at least 25% cavity reductions, no matter how much you make, what socioeconomic status you come from, how educated you are, or what's your access to dentistry. For some people, and many people, the only dental care they will ever get is from fluoridated water. And I will tell you 25% reduction is low, very conservative. And that's from public health studies, which is not the same as what we see in our offices with taking x-rays, seeing early cavities. That is not considered when the 25% cavity reductions are done. I'm not cutting at public health. I'm saying that that's how studies are done. To give you these numbers, we see greater impacts than that. You'll hear about alternatives to water fluoridation. Are there alternatives? Let people, I'll play like an anti-fluoridation at a time. If you want it yourself, take a tablet of fluoride, drop it in your own water, mix it up. You can do it. Why do we all have to drink it? Well, guess what? You all have to stop at traffic lights. That's a public policy. We can't walk up and just slap someone, a policeman in the head, and get away with it. That's for public health, public civility. Everything we do that has public, whether it's a road, a library, schools. If you don't have kids, you still have to pay for schools. If you don't drive a car, you still pay for roads. Well, public health is impacted by community water fluoridation. It is the gold standard. If you don't like it, you don't have to drink it. That's pure and simple. And there's ways around that we can get to. And Gary, that was one of my props. I had a faucet that I brought with me that I use as a prop. And I doggone it, I can't find it. But next time I'll have it taped to my forehead. Fluoridated toothpaste is wonderful, but it doesn't replace water fluoridation. They work together. Fluoride supplements compliance for that is around 30%. You have to have the money to get it. You have to have a prescription to get it. You have to have transportation to go get it. And you have to get a prescription every year to get that. It's the same as with antibiotics or any other prescriptions. You get about a 30% compliance with it, which is unbelievable. And nothing works as well as community water fluoridation or is as cost effective. You get it in the water, everybody in the community benefits from it. The Mayo Clinic the two brothers founded the Mayo Clinic, and one of the tenets that they founded it on was oral health. And they realized back in, I think it was the 40s when they founded the Mayo Clinic, they said the mouth is a window to your overall health. What comes in through your mouth absolutely matters to the rest of your body. God love them. They recognized the head was attached to the body long before a lot of other physicians have gotten to that point, my family included. Well, what are the health benefits of fluoridation? I mean, it's we're talking simple stuff, but you got to reduce this down to simple discussions. And I do want you to know, I'm a pediatric dentist, as I was introduced, and I talk to kids in terms that kids understand. And I want you to know something. You have to have these terms when you talk to other people as well, especially when you're talking to fluoride decision makers, or you're talking to a group like Kiwanis or United Way, or anyone that you're speaking with. The literacy level is not at what ours is as healthcare professionals. If you start talking about cavities as caries, they don't know what you're talking about. So it's not because I'm a pediatric dentist that I'm dumbing down, so to speak, and I hate to say that, but it is telling you in ways that will help others understand what you're talking about. I like the word cavities. Some like the word decay, but I'll also say if I'm in front of a group with others that are testifying in front of a city council or elsewhere, I'll say cavities, decay, and caries are 3 words in dentistry that we have for the same thing. So cavities are reduced from everybody from fluoridation. It's not everything. You don't get rid of brushing. You don't get rid of flossing, eating well, and getting checkups and dental sealants. It's one piece of the puzzle. Cavities are multifactorial, but it is the closest thing that we have to a silver bullet. We don't have a vaccination. If we did, we'd all be able to play more time doing other things that we'd rather do. One thing you need to remember also is dental cavities are the most common chronic disease of children and teens. And it's significantly more common than asthma, obesity, and diabetes. Does it get the attention that those others get? No. It's an infectious and transmissible disease. People don't realize that. I can tell you that I knew it, but I really didn't stress that as a clinician. I do now, because when you say something that children aren't born with bacteria in their mouth, we kiss them and give it to them, that starts to grab people's attention. We're not talking about something that is a little hole in the tooth. We're talking about something that can kill a person, can make them not think well. They can't eat properly. They will have poor functioning in learning in school, going to work. They'll miss work. They'll miss school. They'll miss days of productivity that they would normally have, and they actually perform worse when they have cavities as graduates from high school than when they have healthier teeth. And it also leads to deaths. This girl on the left, people look at this picture and think that she's probably been beat up. Well, she hasn't. She has an abscess in an upper molar. When you see that face swelling out like that and her eye starting to close, she has, as we all do, we have this little vein area between our eye and our brain called the venous plexus. The only veins in your body that don't have valves. And when you have an eye infection or infection that's starting to swell your face and close your eye like that, you can be a day from dying. And that does happen. The one gentleman in the middle, Diamante Driver, one that was very famous, unfortunately, from his death, but it was called out by a reporter, Marriott, who has gone on to write on and on about oral health, and she is just a fantastic speaker if you've never talked with her. The other gentleman was a truck driver from California. He's Russian. He took off from California to New York. Halfway across the country, his tooth started hurting him. He stopped at the dentist. They began a root canal, temporized it. He went on, delivered his stuff. He was going to stop back by on the way back, but on his way back, he got so sick he had to go to the hospital. By the time his brother got to him, he died of a brain abscess. Abscess brains, septicemia, is a very large number of people. There's a large number of people dying from it every year. But that's not the first thing listed on their toe tag. There's cardiac arrest. There's other things. And then there's an abscess tooth listed. So it's more common than we really, really know. Is it still necessary today, fluoridation? Remember I said it was 60 to 70% effective back when it began? Well, it absolutely still effective. In this day and age where we have fluoridated toothpaste, fluoride in foods that are processed and drinks that are processed in areas with fluoridated water, that's called a halo effect. People who don't live in a fluoridated community get some benefits of fluoride from getting their foods and things from areas that have fluoridated water, and they're eating and drinking those things. But when you add fluoridated water on top of teeth or cavities that are already being reduced by toothpaste, fluoridation will stop 25% more cavities in adults and children. Absolutely needed. You'll hear me say adults and children, and I want you to remember that when you talk about it, you always say adults first, because it is a tactic and a ploy. Politicians play games. I don't want to tell you that, but I'll show you what happened to the ones here in my county that voted out fluoridation for over 700,000 people. There was a reason we had it back 15 months later. But they say, well, it's for the children. It's for the poor children. Why don't we give the poor children fluoridated water? Why don't we give them fluoride toothpaste and toothbrushes? Because they're the ones that really need it. Well, no. Everybody, no matter what you make in money, your level of education, everybody benefits. Poor families get twice as many cavities as those that are not. A recent study that was done in North Carolina looked at cavities in fluoridated versus non-fluoridated communities. And what they found was that in a third grade classroom of 30 children in a fluoridated community would have 39 fewer cavities in their primary teeth than those in a non-fluoridated community. 39. That's counting 30 kids. That means in fifth grade or third grade. Next year, they're going to have 18 less cavities. That same 30 kids, and it goes on and on and on from there. This is sad, but it's exciting because opponents to fluoridation say that it stops one cavity or saves one tooth over 40 years of time. And that is, I'll be nice, it's not right. It is something that they have played with numbers on. 3 communities recently, within the last couple of years, have had cessations and done studies. One was the capital of Alaska, Juneau. In Juneau, Juneau, if you've ever never been to it, which I haven't, it's a place that you have to fly into and out of to be able to get to it. Otherwise, it's pretty much isolated. You can get there by ferry, but you just can't drive to it. So they had stopped fluoridation, and a researcher by the name of Jennifer Meyer looked at kids that were getting, she started seeing these black teeth on kids on the playgrounds because she grew up in a fluoridated community and moved to Juneau, and her kids began to get cavities like other ones, and she started studying it. She's not in the dental field. She's a researcher, and she looked at it, and what she found was children who were born during fluoridation versus those that were not having fluoridated water had an additional one additional dental procedure per year per child. Calgary, Alberta, Canada, cavity rates skyrocketed within 3 years of them stopping water fluoridation. 146% in their primary teeth in 3 years. Usually you don't see much in 3 years. Well, they saw a huge amount. And Lindsay McLaren did that study, and she's coming out with another one. Windsor, Canada, Ontario, they stopped fluoridation. This is all political. There's not a scientific reason in the world to stop it. But these people are playing games with politics. Doesn't matter what party you are. Republicans were here. Democrats do it in other states, and then independents do it. It's all about less government. And I was very naive to that when I began. I thought they really didn't understand the science. I found out, and I got ugly. Windsor said to the folks, to the health department, track it for 5 years, come back and tell us what you see. And in 5 years' time, they had an increase in cavities in second grade children that they surveyed. This is public health surveillance. Why, when Gary said that Dr. Dane is doing numbers, surveillance, that's how important surveillance is to see what goes on. Because you can show cavity rates in areas that are comparable to each other where you don't get a lot of mobility in families. That one fact alone of an increase of 51% in a 5-year period flipped the vote from an 8-3 to take it out to an 8-3 to put it back in. And they're going to restart it. Calgary's working to restart it. Juneau, Dr. Meyer has got to be a friend. I said it's time for us to work on Juneau. Let me just go over this one again in Alaska. Again, taking a class of 30 kids. At age 3, they would have one more cavity procedure. That means extraction, stainless steel crown, root canal, something, whether it's just a filling, something more done per year. So you've got 30 kids over here when fluoridated water was fluoridated, 30 kids after fluoridation stopped. The 30 kids after fluoridation stopped would have 30 more cavities than the group that didn't, that had fluoridated water. Next year they would have 60 more, 30 plus 30. By the third year, they would have 90 more cavities than this group that had fluoridated water. They're still going to get cavities because they're eating junk, but they're going to have 30, 30, 60, and 90 more cavities in this group without fluoridated water. That's how you have to look at it. To an elected official, you talk about one cavity. What's one cavity? Oh, we know that one cavity can kill a person. It's an infectious and transmissible disease. You have to stop it. You have to look at it in that manner. We can fix them, but we're not stopping them. We have to stop it. And fluoridation is the closest thing that we have to stopping it for everybody as a vaccination. We know that cavities are unevenly distributed. As I said before, low-income kids are twice as likely to get cavities. And the disadvantaged bear a disproportionate burden of that. In Missouri, with your poverty rate right around 12.9, it did go down a little bit over the last year or two, but you still have almost 800,000 people living in poverty. those families, that's more than 1 in every 10 person you pass on the street. They're living in poverty, and they're living in with teeth that are in worse shape because of that. Now, I won't gross you out, but the picture on the bottom, on the right side, if you don't treat kids much, you don't know. Man, those of us that do, or God bless you, if you're in a family practice and you treat kids, you know that that's the gum. That's not gum tissue on top of that molar. That's actually the nerve growing out to try and fight itself away from the infected tooth. That's a pulp polyp. Makes for good pre-dinner or pre-lunch pictures. This is one of the biggest reasons that you can say to anyone that should make a huge impact. By fluoridating the water, there are now 4 studies that have shown that you will avoid the need for treatment in an operating room with general anesthesia by 2/3 to 3/4 simply by fluoridating the water. In fact, water operators prevent more cavities by fluoridating the water than all of us as dental health care professionals can ever do in our lifetime. Now, I don't have a statistic for that. I have the head fluoridation engineer at the CDC, Kip Duchan, who just retired a year and a half ago, will tell you that every day of the week, and he's right. There's no way that we can ever prevent as many cavities or reach as many people as water fluoridation does. Here's that same child afterwards. What have we done? We've made a pretty picture. Any of those of us that have had to do this, we know we've created a dental cripple. We've created someone that's going to be going to school, being made fun of with silver teeth. We make them feel better when they're getting their treatment done or their work. We tell them they're getting jewelry on their teeth. And they're proud until somebody, when these back teeth are going to be kept until they're 10 to 12 years old. But what happened to you? You look like that person in the movies with all those silver teeth on. That's ugly. This is not a good situation. Now, we want to know how we know that fluoridation is safe and about IQ. And this is a part that I'm going to get really passionate about. But Ashley, why don't we stop? And do you have any questions at this point that people would like to ask?
We do not have anything in the chat at this time. If anybody has a question, feel free to put it in the chat.
Fluoridated Diet Coke, fluoridated water. If you ever going to have to go defend a fluoridation in front of your city council, have some fun. Get a bottle of water and take it with you. And the opponents will say, look, he's not even drinking the tap water. He's drinking the bottled water. He won't even drink it. I said, well, I just filled it out in the hallway out of the water cooler. I dumped out what was in here. It's unfortunate to have to play games, but again, I'm a brat that nobody wanted to be around when I was young, and I still am a brat. But I'm doing it. I love this. To me, it is a passion.
Johnny, we do have one in the chat. What can you tell us about the cost of the 1 cavity per child per year?
The 1 cavity per child per year was around $300 was the impact. And the interesting part that happened in Juneau was as soon as they stopped water fluoridation, they increased sealants by 7-fold. This was on a population of Medicaid population, They increased it 7-fold. There was a lot of muting of actual cavities that occurred by doing that. They also did not count extracted teeth in their data, because if the chart notes didn't show why it was extracted, maybe it was extracted because it was impeding another tooth from coming in. If it didn't say why it was, they just decided we're going to take and exclude all extractions. We're only going to count stainless steel crowns, root canals, and fillings. So there was a saving. I think the cost was right around $300 of savings per person per year is what that came out to be. Again, dollar-wise, it doesn't sound as impactful to people who are making these decisions. I mean, we can get into that a little bit, but you have to really do it on a scale of, okay, look at this. Look at it on a scale of what happens in your entire town, what happens in your entire city. when you're doing this sort of thing and spending that much more money. If you're spending $300 more on one person, if you've got 30 kids, what's that, $9,000? I'm figuring right, ciphering right in my head. That's $9,000 more that the government has to pay through Medicaid that would not have to be paid if they had kept fluoridated water in place.
We do have one other one to come in here. How do mishaps like Flint, Michigan, and hundreds of other cities impact your efforts to have community water fluoridation?
Not a bit. And it's because you have to know how to explain that. Opponents will say, well, they're saying it right now about Green Bay. Green Bay, Wisconsin is under attack by the anti-fluoridationists. And they say Green Bay's the next Flint, Michigan. Well, listen, I'm not sure how much everyone knows about Flint or not, but it's a pretty easy story. Flint, Michigan had fluoridated water because they were on Detroit's water system. But they had huge economic problems. And they had people from the state come in and they actually took over all the decision making for the money that was spent in the city. And so they said, we've got a lot of money problems. We're going to get off of Detroit's water. We're going to go on to the Flint River and we're going to begin using that. They were not fluoridating the water when they started using Flint River water. So that had nothing to do with the lead issue that was going on. What happened was, I'm not laughing, but this is something that you just want to reach over and smack somebody when they say this is the next Flint. Fluoridation was not going on. They were not buffering the water at the water plants, buffering it because that the Flint, Michigan, or the Flint River, it was caustic, it was acidic, and you have to buffer that to where it's around neutral, 7.7 pH, and they were not doing it. Therefore, that water began to eat off the corrosion layer on the inside of the pipes, which is a good thing. Corrosion on the inside of a pipe to help protect the pipe from being eaten. Water is the most powerful solvent that we know. It eats away at everything. So there are corrosion layers that built up on the inside of pipes. Well, what happened was that caustic water not being buffered right, taking away some of the corrosion layer, and when it got to the end users where they had lead fittings in their homes from solder, that lead was getting into the families. It was about 2 years before they had one pediatrician that stood up and said, we have an issue. So Flint was played out, and we had they couldn't even say the F word in the Flint public health arena whatsoever. They call it the F word. And I have a friend that's in the water treatment arena up there. But it was definitely improperly handled water. Had nothing to do with fluoridation.
And
now they have
Sorry, we had a clarifier to that question too. How does that relate to the trust in government aspect?
From Flint or from?
From Flint.
Because eventually it was corrected, but it was a cover-up. And everybody that was, up to I think it was in the governor's office as well, heads rolled. And that's the government, that's the world we live in. We live in a government democracy where if things go wrong, I'll tell you some of the best people, like we talked about with the media winning the Pulitzer Prize down here, they dig in. They don't let go. Once they sink their teeth into it, that stuff comes out and it's made right. Trust in government is that we don't let people do things that are harmful for themselves. Fluoride is already in the water, and all we're doing is adjusting it up to the level that Mother Nature showed us was effective in preventing against cavities, and it was safe. So it is something that will be brought up occasionally, and hardly at all anymore, but it will be brought up occasionally, and it's easy to put to rest because it had nothing to do with fluoridation. They were not fluoridating their water when that went on. They were on their own separate Flint River water because it was a decision made to cut cost, and it was a bad decision because they didn't properly treat the water at that point in time. If they treated it, they wouldn't have fluoridated water, and they still would not have had the lead issue. if they had buffered that water appropriately. That's just one of the many things that are additives that are added to water to treat it appropriately. But it was not handled right. The whole story's not totally out, but we know very easily what went on.
Those are our only questions at this time.
Okay, well, let's move on to why do we know that fluoridation is safe, and why do we know that the IQ is not affected, or is it affected? Well, there are numerous studies and reviews that go on all the time, looking at all aspects of our lives and our health and things that we take. Water fluoridation undergoes studies every 2 years, 2 to 4 years in England. Public Health England is mandated every 4 years. They're mandated every 4 years to look at the safety effects of water fluoridation. The Archives of Toxicology just came out with a publication showing that fluoridated water does not cause health issues. And in fact, it really was very damning to the one study out of Canada that has been promoted and is being made into truly a Andrew Wakefield moment about that fluoride is guilty until proven innocent. We'll go into that in just a minute. It's been looked at over the years, and these are just a few of the groups that have looked at fluoridation over and over again. Because if there's a problem with it in safety, who wants to know but us? As dental professionals, sometimes I'll get asked the question, why are you so forceful in wanting this? I'm like, well, you're right. We can make a whole lot more money with fixing cavities. Well, a lot more money. But this is an infectious disease. Do you think that physicians were upset? Well, current example, but I'll go back to smallpox. When smallpox was eradicated, do you think physicians were upset that they could no longer treat smallpox? No. It's an infectious and transmissible disease that they were able to cure. Now, are they upset that COVID is going to have a vaccine? Absolutely not. I'm not upset. I had COVID, and I want a vaccine because I don't know if I'll get it again or not. And it's nasty. So it's looked at. We want to know if there's ever a problem with things like this. We look at, if you go in on the National Library of Medicine and you Google the word water fluoridation, you'll come up with thousands of studies that have been conducted about water fluoridation. Thousands. This is over a period of 75 years. We've studied fluoridation over and over again because we want to know how it works, if it continues to work, if it's safe for our bodies. It's the consensus of the entire body of literature is where public policy, health policy comes from. Is every study going to agree with another one? No. There's going to be some that are showing one thing or showing another. When you repeat that study, does it come out with the same result? Repeating it several times, do you come out with the same result? Well, we look at the overall body of evidence, and the overall body of evidence has continued to support water fluoridation as effective and as safe at the levels that we're talking about. There are two studies that have come out of Mexico and Canada that fluoride is causing IQ problems. There are many problems with those studies. One of the co-authors that I know on both of those studies is a friend, and we've discussed in detail some of the shortcomings. In both the Canadian study, which you may have heard of, it was by Rivka Green and Christine Till and that group, as well as the one Bash Hash. It was out of Mexico. There was never any fluoride intakes being measured in pregnant mothers, is what they were looking at. They were looking to see if their offspring would have any IQ problems. All they looked at was fluoride, what was in the fluoride of the urine of these mothers. Now in Mexico, that study was started as an arsenic study to see what IQ issues were. The samples were kept, and they looked at calcium levels to see if that had any impact. And then as fluoride began to be pointed at by anti-fluoridationists as an IQ issue, samples were there. They checked it. It was fluoridated salt, not water fluoridation. Plus, there was some fluoride in their drinking water and in the toothpaste. So you don't know what your intakes are, and you've got levels in both of the studies, the Canadian study and in Mexico, where in Canada it's fluoridated water. You had people in that group that had up to 4 parts per million in their urine. Well, that's not coming from water fluoridation. If it's coming from salt fluoridation, it's the same type of thing. Something else is going on. People are getting fluoride from other aspects of their lives, whether it's from fumigation products, whether it's from swallowing toothpaste. They did not take continuous data. And that's one of the biggest problems is they're looking at things without having points in between birth and the ages that they're measuring IQ. They have no idea what's going on between that time frame. Let's go to the study from Canada. This is the one that's been talked about causing IQ deficits in kids when they're 3 to 4 years of age, when pregnant mothers drank fluoridated water. When they looked at the overall differences between boys and girls in non-fluoridated areas versus fluoridated, there was only a 0.14 IQ score difference. Study pretty well could have been over with by then. But researchers do look for a subgroup that maybe there's something different because they're paid to do the research. My daughter is a researcher as well. One is. And she said, we look at subgroups to see if there's some kind of an association that we can find. But you don't keep looking and looking and looking until you get down to some rabbit hole that you find something. Well, that's what happened with this. They kept pulling into a rabbit hole until they finally found a subgroup of boys that had a significant deficit of IQ, whereas the girls in that group had a slight increase in IQ. People came out of the woodwork from around the world and were screaming that this thing was wrong. There were some serious issues. Psychologists, neurologists, nephrologists from around the world were coming out saying, we want to see your data. We want to see it. We want to see what you've done, how you've manipulated it, and we want to do the same permutations of all this. And that group has never given their data to anyone else to look at. The U.S. government paid for it, but we're not getting to look at it. Well, there's an agency in Canada called the Canadian Agency for Drugs and Technologies in Health. They are a group independent that has been appointed and formed by the different Canadian governmental agencies, and they evaluate everything in health and technology and any effects from drugs. They did an evaluation of that study, and they said that 2 big points were that the evidence that they were looking at had so many limitations that it was weak. And then in conclusion, that their data did not support their conclusions. Essentially, this group that did the study in Canada, this Canadian watchdog agency, basically like a FDA here, Food and Drug Administration, said, this is not right. You can say what you're saying, but it's not right. So it's been discredited. They did not consider the parents' IQ scores. You have to know that affects kids' IQ. Did they measure anything between birth and the time that the kids were 3 to 4 years old? No. Did they not collect data on both parents' socioeconomic status? They did not use a reliable method to measure actual fluoride exposure. They used zip codes as an estimate of how much fluoride was in the water based on what came out of the plant. And they used a sample that was not representative of all Canadian mothers. These families were pretty much well off, and they were pretty much all white. So it was not a representative sample. Well, I mentioned the 2020 Archives of Toxicology came out with an article, and they looked at several studies, but this was one that they really came out with a strong statement on, and it was by Guth et al., Guth. All of these slides have resources on them for you to be able to look at this information yourself. If you so desire, this is definitely available to you. One of the biggest problems was, and if you have children and you have a child that's just a new 3 or one that's an old 4, almost 5, as parents, we know there's a huge difference in the kids and their intelligence and focusing ability. This study used one test and didn't really specify at what age it was taken. They were looking at other tests. They were looking at tests that were taken. But they didn't specify the age. And Guth et al. Said this may be problematic because the IQ of children changes strongly between 3 and 4 years of age, which as parents we know that. There's no doubt about it. So there's been some serious issues. Again, the requested data has been requested by other researchers, which is normal to share your data with others because the scientific community, we're the hardest on each other and ourselves. They will not share it. Well, the National Toxicology Program, you may have heard about this, has put together a draft monograph. And I will say that it is the opponents of fluoridation that spurred this to be done. They said there's already this green study that was done in Canada that showed there was IQ problems from fluoridated water, and they said, we think you need to do a study. I don't understand how we can push this sort of thing and get it done on taxpayer dollars, but they do it all the time. Well, they came out with a draft monograph on systematic review of fluoride exposure and neurodevelopmental and cognitive health effects last year. And that study, or that review that they did, the draft, was torn apart by their peer review group. They asked the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, NASEM, to do a peer review of it. And they tore them up. They said, you have looked at this in a way that you have considered fluoride under 1.5 parts per million, and you're saying that it's a presumed neurotoxin at levels under 1.5 and above 1.5 parts per million. They said you need to go back, and there was a lot of problems with that, what they wrote up, a lot. But I'm just going to summarize the one thing that they did go back and change is that they went back and said, you need to say something about water fluoridation because you're talking about levels in the United States. So the NTP did go back and look at it, and they came out with the statement that they didn't have enough evidence to say that water at fluoridation levels is a presumed neurotoxin, but above 1.5 parts per million, it is a presumed neurotoxin. Well, again, that NASEM group tore them up the first time, heavily criticized them because of the quality and research and analysis that they relied upon. So now the NTP has re-released it as a revised version. They just handed it over to NASEM for another peer review, and there's almost no changes at all in what they wrote up. So NASEM's going to be coming back with some strong recommendations. If you're going to use studies that are not good studies, and you're going to look at those, and that's what they did. A lot of them that were given by the anti-fluoridationists to them in foreign languages that were not translated from China. That's not considering the appropriate information. It's important to know that the American College of OBGYN tweeted after the Mexican study came out, and they still support it, that water fluoridation is important for mothers during pregnancy. Mothers eat a lot more. I eat a lot more with them. I gain weight right along with my wife, and we need fluoridated water to help keep mom's teeth in good shape. She's much worse off if she gets a tooth with a problem during pregnancy and has to have that tooth taken care of, extracted, a potential infection. How is that going to affect the baby? There is a strong consensus of support on the safety of water fluoridation and the effectiveness of water fluoridation. And a lot of times we're talking to water groups, we're talking to decision makers about these things. And if we list American Academy of Pediatrics, that's the most trusted group by most everyone, decision makers. They stand behind water fluoridation after all these studies have come out. They stand behind them because they've read them. They've evaluated them, and they say that one study is not going to change public health policy because that study was not a well-done study. All of these groups continue to support water fluoridation as strong and safe and effective. What do the opponents have to say about this? That's a rubber stamp. Well, leading health and scientific and health organizations around the world support water fluoridation as safe and effective. Not a single one opposes it. Not one single credibly recognized group opposes it. Would they be calling that a rubber stamp if they had all these listed? It's not bragging points. All these folks look at these studies. It's clear weight of science is on the side of water fluoridation being safe and effective. Again, no widely respected medical or health organization in the world opposes fluoridation at all. To sum this part up, water fluoridation is effective at reducing cavities, needless pain and suffering. It is safe. There are no adverse health effects in anyone, not one. Pay attention to this one. We had a change back in 2015 based on a study that was released, and we used to say $1 saves $38 in dental treatment cost. This study looked at everything: cost of machinery, cost of equipment, people's time off from work. Fluoridation saves the average person $32.19 per year in dental treatment cost per year. That's $32.19 in their pocket to spend on something else other than treatment. Multiply $32.19 times how many people are in the town you come from. You can get into the hundreds of thousands of dollars in disposable income that people are going to have if you start fluoridating. Just the reverse. If you stop fluoridating, now they're spending $32.19 at the dentist, which is non-taxable monies, which is impacting how a city's going to be able to run. You take money out of the pockets of the taxpayers, taking it out of the pockets of the community. You don't get the same benefits of fire departments, police, all the activities that you normally would. Prevention of cavities by fluoridated water helps everyone in the community. And this is where I had my faucet I was going to turn on and off just by turning on the tap. And again, it's recommended by the leading health and scientific communities around the world. You probably heard this, but it's worth saying again that the CDC called water fluoridation one of 10 great public health achievements of the 20th century. One of 10. There were hundreds of great public health achievements. This was one of 10, along with seat belts, immunizations, better, healthier mothers and babies, and 7 others. Fluoridation reduces a quarter of the cavities you'll ever have over your lifetime simply by drinking it. And that's above and beyond what fluoridated toothpaste and other things like fluoride rinses and fluoride varnishes will prevent. As of 2018 data, we have over 207 million U.S. residents that have access to fluoridated water. I'm sorry. Gracie, honey, you can't squeak that while Daddy's on the phone. A German wire-haired pointer. She's getting bored. She's heard me do this before. Let's go through Homeland Security briefly, and then we can stop for a couple questions. As I mentioned before, one out of every 10 people that applied for the Army in World War II was rejected because they didn't have 3 teeth on the top and 3 teeth on the bottom that matched. Fast forward to today. This is our current Surgeon General, Jerome Adams, an anesthesiologist, very appalled when one of the first patients that he saw as an anesthesiologist was there for dental treatment, a child in his operating room, opened the mouth and saw what was going on. It is so wonderful to have physicians in this position that will get up and speak to it. Even at this day and time, half of our Army recruits cannot be deployed because of dental issues. This is a national Homeland Security issue. When you look at folks in military that are in the field, it affects, again, our military readiness. It's important to be able to get out and to be able to fight. And if dentists, and especially pediatric dentists that have patients that go on into the military, they have to have every tooth taken care of, including getting their 3rd molars out. because if they're on a dental field, and if they're on a battlefield and a toothache happens, it is a serious issue because they have to be extracted, not the tooth, but the person has to be extracted from that battle zone. And it will absolutely put the whole mission at risk, as well as the people that are extracting them out, flying in to get them out. You've got fluoridated water that helps prevent a quarter of all cavities. It absolutely helps our homeland security to be top notch and in the best shape that we can. Quick questions?
We do have one. Many people are now using water filtration systems because they do not trust the safety of their drinking water. Do these systems filter out fluoride? And how about the increased use of bottled water?
Good questions. As far as the filtration systems, the ones like Brita filters and that type do not take fluoride out. And on the actual filter, it will say does not remove fluoride. It removes taste and smell. They're charcoal filters is what they are. A reverse osmosis unit will take fluoride out of the water. About 80, almost 87 to 90% of fluoride will be removed from the water. I highly recommend parents not to do it. You want to do something, use a charcoal filter. If you don't like the smell of chlorine, which down here is a big issue because of the heat, use a refrigerator water for kids. They don't want to go to the refrigerator anyhow. When the water's cold, it doesn't smell. But it takes either a whole house filter, which are carbon filters, which are about $5,000 to $10,000, which most people will not invest in, that will remove, or a under the sink type of reverse osmosis. But other filters like the Brita, Pure, those types of filters do not remove fluoride from the water. And the second question, I'm sorry, bottled water. Bottled water. Most bottled water has very little fluoride in it. But in this country, the bottled water companies are not required to put fluoride on the label, what's in it. Other countries do. I'll tell you that you can find out what is in it. And in San Pellegrino, it can be up to 0.44 parts per million. In Arrowhead, and I've looked into all of these before, Arrowhead brand can have up to 1.4 parts per million. Doesn't have to say it on the bottle because it's coming from the groundwater or it's coming from the tap. They may be bottling it, seriously, they may be bottling it directly out of a tap at a factory in a town that's fluoridated, and you're getting that water, and they can call it anything they want to call it. So we are concerned, obviously, not only for landfill, for fluoride, appropriate fluoride amount, but bottled water is not a healthy water. Bottled water falls under the Food and Drug Administration as a food. You all may have remembered hearing about 2 years ago or so where Kroger was selling infant water, which is bottled water, and they found mold in it. And that's because it does not have the strict requirements for testing that the EPA requires of tap water. Tap water is the safest water for us to drink. You won't find mold in tap water. Bottled water is not supposed to be consumed by people who have transplants or who are immunocompromised. Many people who have health issues are advised not to drink it, and I think including pregnant mothers, because the bacterial counts can be high in it. You don't have that in tap water. So not only for those reasons, but there's one even better besides landfill. It's estimated by 2055 there will be more bottles of plastic bottles in the ocean than there will be fish. When you tell people that 2055 is not that far away, that gets a gasp out of people usually. I mean, you have to make it visual for people to understand these things. But those are great questions. Any others?
No, those were the only ones right now.
Okay, keep me on time. We're going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to go to looking at what is the maximum amount of fluoride that naturally can occur in water that the Environmental Protection Agency allows us to let people drink. And that has been set at a level of 4 parts per million or 4 milligrams per liter. Now, we're talking two separate things here. We're talking, one is fluoridated water, which is the amount of fluoride in water where it will prevent 25% of cavities for everyone. And the EPA sets the level of what is the maximum amount that can be in the water where people will have no adverse health effects from it. And that is something that's been set by the EPA because it's naturally occurring in our water around the world. But here in the U.S., as I was saying, we have it up to 16 parts per million from wells. In different areas, there's over 200,000 people that have it above 4 milligrams per liter. They're drinking from private wells, communities are. It cannot be put through a water system, a community water system, if it's above 2 parts per million. You cannot serve that water. There was a very thorough study done of literature back in 2006. Every few years, the EPA will say there's been a substantial amount of literature produced. Let's sit down and appoint a National Research Council committee and have them review all of this data of the past 10 years, however long they feel that it's been appropriate amount of time. And let's let them look at it and see, is there anything about these studies that show that at these levels, 2 to 4 parts per million, is still okay for us to drink, or is it not? Is it harmful? Well, opponents like to say that it shows that water fluoridation is harmful. Pretty funny. On page 20, it says this report is not about water fluoridation. So it's always a twist of words. It's science fiction. But again, I won't digress and go off on a tangent as I would if you meet me up at my farm sometime and we go out and shoot a hog or sit around and have a beer or just sit around and talk. Cook you some good food. I have a different vernacular when I'm around other areas, but I'm being very politically correct. So this study that was done, it was 3.5 years of evaluation by 12 of the top scientists in the U.S. and Canada and a toxicologist. 3.5 years of looking at this data from the studies that they were looking at to see if there was anything in commonality that they could look at from these studies that showed that there was a potential harm. Well, they evaluated it and they came out with three things. One was we have toxic endpoints that we can evaluate for bone fractures, for skeletal fluorosis, and dental fluorosis. That was the only 3 things they really found that they could look at and see that could potentially be issues. Again, they were looking to see if 4 milligrams per liter was still protective of people's health, and no adverse effects were occurring, and the margin of safety was judged to be adequate. Well, what they found was, at 4 parts per million, that severe fluorosis occurred. And this, as the first time in 2006, they considered severe fluorosis a health issue. The majority of the committee did. Argue with it or not, they said it was, so that's what we go with. At 2 parts per million, they said that severe fluorosis was virtually zero. Forget the page that's on, I think it's 345. Not that I read that book often, but I have to know these facts. But severe dental fluorosis was virtually zero. We're talking about the level that we use for fluoridated water. You do not develop any severe dental fluorosis, and I'll show you that in just a minute to show you what it looks like. They looked at all of the systems in the body off of those studies that were looked at. The only definitive evidence that they found at 4 parts per million of fluoride in water naturally occurring, not added, naturally occurring, was severe dental fluorosis of the enamel. No IQ problems, no liver, no kidney, no neurotoxicity, no cancer, nothing else. Nothing else. It's important to remember because this book is still being used right now, pulling out tidbits of information to say, well, in this book they said it causes enzyme inhibition. It causes it. No, that's not what the group found. There were 3 anti-fluoridationists, 3 pro-fluoridation researchers and scientists, and 6 neutral. And they all signed off on the final analysis of this, that it did not cause these other problems. So here we are. What do we see? Do we see dental fluorosis in areas without water fluoridation? You absolutely do. Why do you think that is? Well, they have some natural fluoride in the water. All water does. Some of it may be higher than other areas. They use fluoridated toothpaste. But what you see a bit more of, not a great deal, is very mild to mild fluorosis in areas that are fluoridated. Moderate fluorosis is using improperly the toothpaste, mouth rinses, kids swallowing it. That's what causes the moderate fluorosis, which is the areas with about more than half of the tooth covered by the white areas. And severe dental fluorosis, the pitting, brown stains. Remember that back in 1901, how they found that there was something going on? That doesn't occur from water fluoridation. Now, water fluoridation, or excuse me, can you see my arrow here where I'm pointing or not? Maybe not. I'm just going to show you on the very mild, towards the tip of the tooth, you can see some white.
We can't see your cursor.
Okay. I will stop cursing then. on the mild fluorosis, you can see it's called, that white area, we call it snow capping. Moderate fluorosis, actually, it's not bad. And I will tell you, there's a study that just came out of Iowa, great researchers, and they confirm what we've seen for years in pediatric practices, that when these teeth are dried off under a bright light and you look at them, those white marks show up. Just walking around the street, you don't really see those in people on very mild to mild fluorosis, and that's the majority of what you see from water fluoridation. Those spots wear off over a period of years. We've seen it clinically. I was in practice close to 30 years, and even the moderate will tend to wear off of that surface. That's a fluoride-rich area is what's giving that appearance. Now, are those the cavity-prone areas in our mouths? No. It's between the teeth and the back, and it's on the chewing surfaces and the inside and the outside. So those areas don't get worn off. So this is something that even it's not a cosmetic issue. When you have people that come in your office and they see little white marks, and in my 30 years, I had probably 5 young ladies in their teens that were always, they weren't my daughters, but I'm sure they would do it too if they had it, in the mirror looking all the time. Can we fix the color of my teeth? And I'm like, but what don't you like about your teeth? I don't like the dark spots. Other anti-fluoridations will say you're scarring them. Those white marks scar them, and mentally it causes them anguish. No, it doesn't. People like white teeth. And so we ask them, what don't you like? They don't like the dark spots. What do? We can bleach the teeth, whiten them up, bring the background up to that lighter color. There's nothing invasive that has to be done. But they will tell you that. They will tell the decision makers that we're going to put tens of thousands of dollars of veneers on these teeth and cover them up. That is an outright lie. Bottom line, which would you rather have? On the left side, without water fluoridation, this is no exaggeration, we've all seen it. I see it when I go to the McDonald's up in Chiefland where I live. On the left side, we're going to get fluoridated water up there. I'm not going to be popular probably, but I don't care. Mild fluorosis on the right side. Those white marks are hard to see. But those teeth will still get cavities with mild fluorosis. They'll get less cavities and less severe cavities, but they'll still get cavities. So fluoride helps to prevent a huge number, but it can't stop them all. All right, let's talk about dental fluorosis. So we went through this whole process up to this point, and we've shown that it's safe, it's effective, and nobody has anything going on with them that it's causing any health issues with. So what we boiled down to with water fluoridation is that you can get some white marks on your teeth. So what do we know about dental fluorosis? Well, again, showing this one because it does not happen at levels above. You don't get severe fluorosis, which is what opponents like to say, from fluoride in the water. Dental fluorosis is nothing but a change in the appearance of the tooth enamel caused by a higher intake of fluoride during tooth forming years. The teeth are the only bone that we have in our body that we can see. Hard tissues, your bones in your body, and your teeth take up fluoride. That's where the majority of your fluoride in your body is going to be taken. It's going to either be in your teeth or your bones, or it's excreted. It doesn't cause anything of pain, a function of the tooth. And again, it's so subtle that people don't really typically notice it at all. And it can only occur while the permanent teeth are developing under the gums up till the age of around 8 years of age. Doesn't happen to adults. So once again, showing you this is how simple it all boils down to on water fluoridation. Opponents will have a list longer than both of my arms of everything that it causes. If you substitute the word fluoridation for vaccinations, it's the exact same arguments. There's, in fact, anti-fluoridation and anti-vaccination people actually join forces under Health Liberty on Facebook in this country. They are one and the same. Let's go into why a small group of people oppose fluoridation. Now, I'm going to tell you, there are some people that truly believe that water fluoridation causes an illness. We have to be sensitive to that. It's easy to go, well, you're wrong. The science doesn't show that at all. The studies don't show it. Well, can I tell you that there's something that's happening that without a single doubt, 1 in a million, something couldn't be happening? Nobody can. But does the science support that? No. But am I going to sit here and tell you that you're on crutches and you're telling me you're on crutches because you drink fluoridated water? Or the person that called my office the day that fluoridated water began restarted, and they said they can no longer sing. She was a singer and her voice is gone. Or they say, I'm not kidding. I mean, this is kind of stuff that goes on. In some communities, fluoridation, I think it was in Grand Rapids actually, 1945. It was January 25th. Well, they were going to start on the 25th, or a week or so before that. But a piece of equipment hadn't come in yet. And the date they said they were going to start, they started getting calls at the water plant. My skin's itching. I've got a rash all over my body. Well, I mean, you can't laugh, but you have to inside because there's nothing going on. They hadn't even started fluoridation yet. And I have convinced one water operator to do that in one city that they were restarting, and he waited 2 or 3 days. I'll never say where it's at, but people were doing that there also. But there are reasons here that I won't go into all of them. I can answer them to you if you can email me afterwards. I will tell you our website is replete with all of this stuff, and that everything can be shown not to be based in science. This is Rita. Rita is one of my 2 donkeys. The other one passed away. I think she got bit by a rattlesnake. She's my pet, and I had pet goats. Rita is a good producer when she eats, that little pile behind her. The opposition like to think that if they throw that against the wall often enough, that some of it's going to stick. And there's some truth to it. But it's up to us to show that that is nothing but dumb. It's not based in science. Okay, let's get into some fun stuff. I enjoyed this part and the last part. So I'll keep watching my time here. Critics like to tell you that it's a mass medication, that it is causing problems for people. Mass medication. Okay, that's a good one. Well, we have a tradition of fortifying foods and drinks to improve our health. Folic acid, and vitamin D, and iodine, and calcium. We traditionally do that to prevent illnesses. Opponents are now suing in the U.S. courts to stop fluoridation based on something that it has nothing to do with the effectiveness. They're saying that the EPA did not follow a certain regimen they were supposed to follow when they said fluoridation was okay. They have sued 108 times in federal court, and in a court of last resort, they have never won that fluoridation is illegal. Fluoridation, like chlorination, is all about prevention. Preventing a disease. Again, are there any good alternatives to fluoridation? No. People say, well, give kids in school supplements and do a school-based dental program. Well, that doesn't do anything for adults. Fluoridated water gets to everyone in a community. Oh, so this is really from one of the top opponents, and I love it. Mother Nature knows that protects the babies from fluoride, that it's not good for them. Mother's breast milk has 230 times less fluoride in it than fluoridated water. Mother Nature gives the babies a whole food, nothing else they need. Well, guess what? Babies don't have enough vitamin D or vitamin K or iron. Mother Nature gave us brains, and God bless the physicians to figure out that if we don't supplement our babies with vitamin D and K and iron shortly after birth, they could have softer bones, anemia, and clotting. So yeah, breast milk is great. We encourage it. You're getting antibodies, you're getting bonding, but we have to also realize that Mother Nature is not protecting babies against fluoride. That's just a red herring, throwing something out there just to scare people. Thyroid gland problems, studies have shown that that is an absolute falsity. And so much, in fact, that this lady is the top practicing endocrinologist, pediatric endocrinologist in the country, has been the president of their group for many years. And when I was up against one of the opponents back in 2013 who was saying that it was causing thyroid cancer and issues, she wrote a scathing letter to him and said she was appalled at the claims he was making, that it does not harm the thyroid gland. Opponents like to tell you that randomized controlled trials have never been done on fluoridation. They really aren't being done, and that is for a reason. You can't do a randomized controlled trial where you give people fluoridated water, and other people not fluoridated water. As soon as you start doing that, as a dentist, we're going to see the differences between the communities. Observational studies are how we discovered fluoride there was an observed effect. They went and found out what was causing it, and that's how it was done. That's how observational studies work. The same thing was done with smoking and lung disease. There was never a randomized controlled trial to be done on that, or sexually transmitted infections, chronic alcohol use. Do they want a randomized controlled trial done on those? No, you need to do it on fluoride. Fluoride is considered guilty until proven innocent in their eyes. I will share with you there is a randomized controlled trial that has been approved by NIH, and it is going to begin shortly. And that's all I'll share with you. So we want to know, is a randomized controlled trial going to show us something different than the observational studies and the cross-sectional ones that we do all of the time and continue to do? So this is something that we want to know as why it's being done. Ashley, how are we doing on time?
You're doing fine on time. We've
How
got
much time
about
do I have
an
left?
hour and 25 minutes total.
Oh, Lordy, I thought I had 25 minutes left. Sorry.
Yeah, so I got about 55 minutes on the clock still. So
Okay. Well, okay, I do want to leave time for more questions. And if you check and there's several coming up, go ahead and let me know, and I will take a break. The opponents, again, another thing. They had all these studies, animal studies. We have 300 animal studies and all these human studies from other countries where fluoride is naturally occurring at high levels like China, India, Mongolia, and Iran. Not fluoridated water, but they had studies. Well, those studies were not theirs. I didn't find them under a rock somewhere. But these studies were poorly done studies. So they approached the National Toxicology Program, the highest, most prestigious group, again, to look at, is there any effect of fluoride on animals? Is there something that's going on with IQ? Again, one of the guys in our group, he said, Johnny, he goes, since 1945, this has been about IQ. It has. And I said, Steve, you're right. I don't know if any of you have ever seen the movie Dr. Strangelove. Not Strangelove. This is Dr. Strangelove. I had seen it. It's a 1960s or 70s movie. Lots and lots of great actors in it. When they stopped fluoridation here in my county, I started to hear the physicians and dentists saying this is nothing but Dr. Strangelove all over again. And I thought, I watched that movie. I loved it because I loved some of the actors in it. I went back and downloaded it from iTunes, and the whole movie is about fluoridation and that the commies were trying to introduce fluoride into our water in 1945 to dumb us down, make us docile, brain control, so that they could take over the U.S. without firing a shot. And this, well, I won't tell you the whole thing. Go watch it. It is really humorous, and it is something that is still really all about IQ. Well, this national toxicology program is one of the most prestigious in our country because they're doing this in all fields, looking at things and how it affects other parts of our bodies. Is it safe for people to use? Well, the Fluoride Alert is the opponent's website, Fluoride Action Network, and they bragged on it that a new fluoride brain study could end fluoridation because they were able to get the National Toxicology Program to conduct a study in 2016 because they agreed that the old studies on rats were poor quality. Well, in 2018, they published their results and they looked at it and they said there are no exposure-related differences in motor, sensory, learning, and memory performance or any of the 9 tests they conducted. In other words, there were no IQ changes, no tissue changes, nothing. They used water at 0 parts per million distilled, 10 parts per million, which when the long Evan-Hood's rat is considered at fluoridation levels of 0.7, and at 20 parts per million, which is considered the EPA's 4 milligrams per liter maximum. Nothing was affected. Antis could not even speak for a while. They're always out to say and brag. They couldn't even say anything. They eventually wrote an article trying to complain and yell about the animal model that was chosen, that was properly chosen, blah, blah, blah. Again, it's not so. Fluoride's a developmental neurotoxin. Again, they're pushing this as a neurotoxin. Well, one of the largest studies that we have had was done in New Zealand, and it was a prospective study looking at people from the ages of preteens. They tested them several times, their IQ over this entire period of time that they were running this test. It was over 30 years, closer to 35 years. They followed this same group that did not have fluoridated water and a group that had fluoridated water. And they retained 95% of them in each group. The IQs were no different 30 plus years later than they were in either group when they first tested them, and they were not any different as adults. It was the same. Fluoridated water did not affect a thing. I mean, it is the only study that tested people over a 30-year period, and it had a large sample size, bigger than anything that the opponents try to pull out of other countries. In fact, when they pull things out of other countries where fluoride levels are at multiples of what they are in the water here in the U.S., it's naturally fluoridated, polluted water. They try to backwards extrapolate it into fluoridated water levels. You can't do that in science. Well, there is a study that was done in Sweden, just accepted for publication in the top economic journal in the world, and this group looked at fluoride levels in the water in Sweden from very low levels up to 1.5 parts per million. Now, Sweden does not fluoridate their water, but again, fluoride's in all water, depends on how much rock is eroded as the aquifer comes up through it to the wells or to the surface. So they looked at all the way up to 1.5 parts per million. These are 2 economists. And they found 0 effects on the cognitive ability of people up to 1.5 parts per million. They also found the best dental health at 0.7 parts per million, and they found a positive impact, which they were also looking for. One of the main outcomes was a positive impact on the economic output of families who have the optimal amount of fluoride in the water. They had close to 80,000 people that were in that group on the cognitive ability. They had several 100,000 that they were evaluating all sorts of things on. If there was any parameter that they felt that was going to change things in any way, they knocked it out. They took it out. So this was a huge, huge study that the National Toxicology Program and the NASEM group did not have because their search databases would not have picked up economic journals. We supplied it to them. NASEM has it now. We gave it to the NTP before they released their revised edition. They didn't use it. NASEM has it for their peer review of that NTP revised piece. They have this now. This is huge. This is a game changer. You will hear that 97% of Western Europe has rejected fluoridated water. That is something that you'll hear over and over and over again when you get into this arena. And please know, you have to step up. And I'll talk about that just a little bit more. But you have to step up and represent. It's scary if you're trying to get someone, your community is being challenged. It's kind of scary you get up. We weren't trained how to do this. I wasn't trained how to do it. But if you don't get up and speak, and these folks start throwing out misinformation, they get looked at as the experts. If you get up, you're going to make a mistake. You're going to say something. So what? If you didn't get up, nobody would be in there fighting for it. We have to take it upon ourselves to help fight it and help organize people to do this. Well, if you look at this top red banner here, 97% of Western Europe has rejected fluoridated water. Well, they do have fluoridated water in Europe. In Spain, Ireland, England, 13 million people. But they also have fluoridated salt. They didn't say fluoride. They said fluoridated water at the top. It's a play on words. Fluoridated salt is used in places where the infrastructure for a water supply is not good. Mexico uses it. A lot of countries use it because they don't have this infrastructure like we have in this country to get water to everyone. They also have wells that have naturally occurring appropriate optimal levels of fluoride in the water. So they use that. Some other European nations use a fluoridated milk to get to the kids in school. Again, that's not helping adults. Neither is a fluoride rinse program that targets children that are available in some European nations. But to say that these 97% of Western Europe has rejected fluoridated water is a play on words. Just as they say 98% of fluoridated water gets flushed down the toilet and onto the lawns. Okay, that 2% works a doggone good job on getting our teeth healthy, doesn't it? 98% of the chlorine in the water is flushed down the toilet and onto the lawns and never used. 2% of that chlorine helps to keep us from dying of bacterial infections from bacteria that's growing in the water. They like to distort oral health data as well. The World Health Organization, pardon me, my allergies are kicking in. World Health Organization takes data from around the world to help others understand and know what's going on. They collect data just like Dr. Dane does very nicely. They showed a graph on the left where fluoride cavity trends were starting to come down. If you can read it, it was around 1983, and excuse me, just a bit before that cavities in all countries, whether they had fluoridated water or not, began to drop off. The chart on the right was reproduced by some anti-fluoride researchers as a linear picture. It looks prettier. You can't straighten out dots into linear, but they did. But the thing that wasn't being done, if you look back for a second, look again on the second graph, around 1975-ish, somewhere in there, a little bit before, similar to the one on the left, about the same time when things started to come down. Well, you probably already know in your mind what else came out around that time. Fluoridated toothpaste. Fluoridated toothpaste came out around that time, and as it grew in popularity, fluoride cavities were going down in all countries that use fluoridated toothpaste. Well, that same World Health Organization data was looked at for a country like Ireland. And they showed that in non-fluoridated areas, the top red line, cavities were coming down from pre-1980s down to 2002 through the time that they had that data. But when you added fluoridated water on top of that fluoridated toothpaste, you reduced it at least another 25%. So if you've seen a video recently put out by the Canadians that had that study that was on IQ that was discredited, these same two top graphs are placed in that. Or these researchers are using it like a pulpit, a church pulpit. Do they show this? Do they know this? Absolutely, they know this. Shame on them for getting out there and saying that it's going down worldwide and we don't need it and it's causing IQ problems. Shame on them. They're really scaring pregnant mothers into not drinking fluoridated water. Is what they're doing. They're telling them they're making their offspring stupid. And my blood boils pretty easily at times. I'll stop on that part. They like to say that the FDA has never approved fluoride for use in water. Well, again, that's a use of words because the Food and Drug Administration does not cover tap water. That's under the EPA's jurisdiction. Bottled water is under the FDA's jurisdiction. Have they ever approved it? Oh, yes, they have. You can see bottled water that has fluoride added to it. When it has fluoride added to it, it has to bear certain words to it, and it says that it's included at a level of 0.7 parts per million to help reduce cavities. Throws that whole argument out the window. They try to tell you that, hey, the FDA doesn't approve fluoride in the water. No, tap water they don't have jurisdiction over, but they do have it over bottled water. So this one simple picture helps to tell a whole lot about what they're saying is totally incorrect. Told you I'm a brat. I do want to thank some of my friends in Louisiana that allowed me to use some of their slides here. I love this one. These are beautiful rocks, igneous rocks, which are a huge part of our crust, Earth's crust, have fluoride in it. There's fluorspar, cryolite, and apatite. Now, apatite is what we have here in Florida in our mines. It's where we get limestone that's mixed with phosphate, and that's where most of our fluoride comes from these days. Fluoride is at a pretty good level in this mixture of phosphate, and any of these rocks, if you wanted to free up the individual components, what you have to do is you have to take a sulfuric acid and you have to dissolve that rock. Well, what are you going to take? If you want to have as much fluoride as you can, fluorspar has a higher amount of fluoride in it. It won't dissolve on its own. The rock won't. You can't just put it in the water and let it dissolve at 2.7 parts per million because it won't do that. You have to break it apart. There's not a lot of this rock around, calcium fluoride. So fluoride is not gotten from that on a routine basis. So these different compounds are used in different ways for different industries, and any of the fluoride that comes off is captured and it's washed over to take it out of hydrofluoric gas and incorporate it into a water bath. That's how they capture it. It's called a scrubber. It's not, the opponents will like to tell you that it's a scrubber that's in a person inside of a smokestack that's scrubbing this stuff out to put into our water. A scrubber is nothing but a piece of equipment at the water plants or at these facilities that captures gases with water and dissolves it. And that's how we get fluoride from these different rocks being broken apart. So we take the one that is cheapest and most pure, and that comes from the phosphate industry. They will tell you that fluoride is the toxic waste byproduct of the fertilizer industry, is how the opponents like to describe it. And I'll turn around and say phosphate is a toxic waste byproduct of the fertilizer industry. True, but it's not. It's nonsense. It's saying that you're taking Mother Nature's parts of what can be used, and you're going to call one piece of it nasty. Can you see that little circled area there? You see it says phosphoric acid? That comes from fluoride production. These boards around me, drywall, that comes out of the fertilizer industry also. Everything that can be used out of the rocks that are being broken apart is used. So it's saying, essentially, it's like saying purses are a toxic waste byproduct of beef production. Butter is a toxic waste byproduct of beef production. It's using what Mother Nature has given us. And when it comes from the phosphate industry, where it's broken down, captured in water, it is a pure product that's tested and assured to meet EPA's strict standards. Now, this is one of those other things that I want you to really focus on is fluoridation is an additive when it's added to water. So is a buffering agent. It's an additive when water is too high in pH or too low of pH. Chemicals are used in a laboratory. When we use our words when we're talking to people, we do not say chemicals for fluoride additives or chemicals for anything else that's used in water treatment, because they're actually considered additives to help make the water potable and ready to drink and not make you sick. So that is something that Kip Duchamp, National Fluoridation Engineer that just retired, Tracy Bomer, National Fluoridation Engineer now at the CDC, any water operator will tell you that. These are additives, not chemicals. There's only 3 additives that are approved for use in the United States, and those are sodium fluoride, sodium fluorosilicate, has different names. Both of those are powders that have to be mixed with water to put them in solution before they can be used. The third one's called hydrofluorosilicic acid. Again, there's different terms for it, but it's all the same thing. The hydrofluorosilicic acid is the most available one and the cheapest one to use, and over the last 60 years or more, it's the primary one that's been used in the United States. You can use any of these 3, but they have to meet strict requirements of the American Water Works Association and the National Sanitation Foundation for meeting the standards of approval for use in water as an additive. If they don't meet that and they are tested, they don't get to be used. This is one that kind of took me at first. Some things, I mean, I like science fiction. I like to read things on my own, but this was one of those ones that kind of like, fluoride additives are not pharmaceutical grade? That sounds like that would be the right thing to do, is to use something like that. Well, pharmaceutical grade fluoride is not controlled by the EPA. It is controlled by the pharmaceutical grading system. There's a USP monograph that says that the manufacturers are supposed to be controlling or adjusting and monitoring what's in these additives. That we use so much in the way of our additives in fluoridating water that some of the actual, I think arsenic's one of them, that is not controlled as far as the amount that can be in a pharmaceutical grade fluoride, that it is not allowed to be used. It is not approved to be used in the U.S. And, excuse me, it is not approved to be used in the U.S. for that reason. It is not a safe product for us to be using. But that is one of those ones that they throw out, and boy, pharmaceutical grade makes sense. Why don't we do it? You want to really throw an anti-fluoridationist off, say, you know what, I agree with you. Let's start using pharmaceutical grade fluoride. Well, no, I don't agree with that either. Just fun stuff. Let's take a quick break and take some questions.
We have one question in the chat, and we do have about 35 minutes remaining, Johnny. So the one question relates to fluorosis, and it asks,
Yes.
at 2 parts per million, does no serious fluorosis mean no fluorosis, or just occasional slight fluorosis?
No, at 2 parts per million, severe dental fluorosis will begin to show up. So there is a maximum level of fluoride that's considered where brown stains occur to be a health effect. There's a 2 parts per million is considered a secondary maximum contaminant level, and that is to control for discolorations of the teeth. So 2 parts per million is set as a point at which tooth discoloration of severe type will start to show up. But now below, as you get closer to 2, you'll start to see some color changes. But at 2, it's like a definitive mark at which you'll start to see severe. Under that, you see the very mild to mild white marks on the teeth.
That was our only question in the chat.
Okay. Oh, okay. I'm going to go over communications pretty quickly because I want to get to this last part. I've been doing communications throughout this presentation to kind of give you words to understand and hone in on and what to kind of stay away from. You think that we give scientific information and we talk to people every day. They trust us and they believe us and they will follow our advice. I found out when I ran for office, after our fluoridation got stopped here in this county and was game playing, I didn't realize went on in political circles as big as a county of 1 million people. I ran for office in 2014, and I had kids that I'd been seeing since they were knee-high to a gnat, and they came in to me until they were 18 years old, and I saw 2 of the mothers at one of my fundraisers, and they came up and they said, "How do we know you're going to do what you say you're going to do? How did you trust me with your child for the last 17 years?" I didn't say it, but I'm thinking, whoa, politics is weird. Well, it's not just enough to give people science for them to believe what we're saying. In this arena, especially in fluoridation. Do you think this young lady knows the science on smoking's problems? Yeah, we all do. It's on TV all the time. We know that smoking causes issues and cancer. It's on every pack. Public knowledge about fluoridation is really pretty doggone low, and I think this was a study that was done that was commissioned by the Pew Charitable Trust, and they said 20% of the people said that they were well informed, and 80% maybe somewhat or not informed at all. I would venture it's way less than 20% of the people that know things. Misinformation, it is easier to scare people than it is to unscare them, and misinformation circulates around wildfire, as you've seen on the internet. We need to be proactive when we talk to people, and this is especially in our offices. When we're in a fluoridated community, we need to say, and hygienists can say this, dental hygienists, because they spend more time with the patient, and when the dentist comes in to check, the dentist can enforce it that your teeth look so good. You have such great, and we are so fortunate to have fluoride in our water. 30 seconds time. It's all it takes. Reinforce it. Or if you're in a non-fluoridated area, you say, come in and check and go, you have 4 cavities. You've got all these white marks on your teeth. We would benefit so much by having our water fluoridated. At every appointment, we're teaching our patients what's good about it, and boy, it sure would be good to have it so we would have healthier teeth. Science is important, but it's not enough to educate people. Again, we must use strategies. Again, one of the biggest is in our dental offices, teaching people. Now, I want to give kudos to Dr. Google, Facebook, and Twitter. It was less than a year ago when they changed their algorithms not to let the anti-vaccination folks get the top hits on websites. And guess what happened to fluoridation? I found out by the top anti-fluoridation in Canada, he was complaining on Twitter. And what happened was it hit fluoridation, anti-fluoridation sites as well. They don't appear, they used to be the first 9 out of the 10 on a Google search. They're not anymore. They're not. Credible science, credible information comes up. That was a godsend. We want to lead with the need when we're talking to people. People have dental illness, dental disease, and fluoridated water is one solution to a real problem that we have. Also, children with poor oral health are 4 times more likely to earn lower grades. These are facts. These are things where you're saying this person is hurting. Getting a job. There's people who will not get a job missing front teeth or having holes in them. They're not going to get as good at a paying job. And we know that in our own offices, and I'm ashamed to say it, but it's true. MSNBC did a piece on it. People with missing or front teeth or holes in them are less likely to get a job. And you won't be told that. but it's a fact. Older adults can't eat as well without all their teeth. Now, every generation since fluoridation began, our families are keeping their teeth longer and longer. I'm 64 and I have all of my teeth, and I am thrilled about it. Misinformation gets spread very easily, and they'll abuse things that have been said by the ADA and other groups to make it really sound bad. We have to kind of listen to what we're saying and what people are going to hear. Intervention. Intervention to people means people are messing with you, like the government's messing with you in your life. Fluoride chemicals that are added to drinking water are rigorously tested for safety and purity. Very true. But remember the word chemical and additive. You have to kind of think of these things because you practice them. In your mind, you have to practice them. And you have to commit to dumbing it down. I hate to say it. 3rd to 5th grade level literacy. I have a friend that is the Speaker of the House in the state of Florida this year. He's one of my former patients. And he said, Johnny, 3rd to 5th grade level and bullet points is what we'll read. The risk of getting fluorosis ends after age 8. Risk? It's not something horrible. Actually, teeth that have mild to very mild fluorosis are more resistant to cavities. We add fluoride to our water at 2 injection points. Has injections ever made anybody feel good? No, we don't think very kindly of it. So we want to look at things as a fear frame and a fact frame. Fluoride chemicals are being poured into our water and exposing us to danger. That's how the opponents would love to say it. We can come back and say fluoride is a mineral that exists naturally in our water supply, which it does, because it comes from the rocks as it goes through and comes up from the aquifer. Simply by adding a small amount, an additional amount of fluoride to protect your teeth from tooth decay is what we're doing. Or you could say fluoride is a mineral. I mean, you're focusing on mineral. Again, you're not saying chemical. And fluoride is a mineral, just like chloride is a mineral, that it naturally exists. And it protects our teeth from decay, a disease that's preventable. Stories are very good. I'll go through this one rapidly. This gentleman in Rutland, Vermont, Rutland was challenged. He's a dentist, and he said, my name is Michael Dick. I am a long-life resident of Rutland and a general dentist in my 41st year practice here. When I first started practicing 41 years ago, the decay, missing, and filled teeth in my population at large was unmanageable. My reception room played loud music to muffle the sound of children crying as their teeth were drilled, filled, re-drilled, and refilled. That is horrible, but that is reality. Just speak from your heart. Speak from your experiences. Those are the most compelling stories that you can give to decision makers. Pictures. Jimmy Kimmel's son. I mean, you don't have to even say anything about this. These sorts of things speak loudly that we have an issue and we're taking care of it. Questions can generate stories. You know, okay, remember when your grandparents used to take their teeth out and flip them in a glass of water when they'd eat dinner? Make things personal and in ways that people can understand. One great one is that airbags, which was one of 10 greatest public health achievements of the 20th century, when they came out, we didn't stop wearing seatbelts. They worked together. That's like fluoridated water, fluoride toothpaste. One doesn't replace the other. We need both of them to work. This is just a quick one to look at on communicating in plain language. You can see what's scratched out, and you can understand why a patient would listen and understand when we speak the speak that's not medical to them. This is the one I always want to say but never do. I'm here to tell you all about fluoride and why it is a no-brainer. That wouldn't go well with anyone. Better to make yourself a resource to people and answer questions that they have. You're going to have people that are opponents. You're going to have people that are pro-fluoride, and you're going to have people who really don't know. They've heard some scary things, and they want to know. And that's why we're talking today, to try and help out with that. You can hold up a piece of a report or literature showing what it is you're talking about. Quite simply, that helps. If you don't know an answer to something, don't answer it. Don't feel compelled. Tell them that you will get back with them and get back with them. Call me. Contact your health professionals, the people, Dr. Dane, those that know the answers and will get the answers. And then you get back with that person and you give them the answer. This is about pivoting back and staying on task. My fun part. Okay, this is not on anybody's dime. This is my off record. I've called you after this was over with because this is advocacy. And I want you to know in the private sector, we can advocate. We can tell our decision makers, this is what we need. We need this kept in our water. We can't let it go out. You are the decision maker. You decide whether to put a crosswalk in at a school, whether people are going to get killed by being run over, or you put a walkover at where bicyclists go over a road. You build bridges out of concrete and rebar instead of mud and straw. You make these decisions of health and safety and protection of your families are here every day. You make the fluoridation decisions. Don't pass it off to someone else. Do you think Dr. Dane or anyone else in the health department could say things like that? That's considered advocacy. That means political discussions. That means people get fired, reprimanded, they get fired. We've had it here. People who've been here for years in public health get fired. We're the private sector. We have to make these conversations happen. We need to talk to the people that make decisions. But one of the biggest things that you need to do is bring a health department person with you. When you do that, they are now obligated to go with you because you've asked for their expertise. So you set up an appointment with a city council person when they're going to be discussing fluoridation. Go to them and talk to them. Say, I brought along Gwendolyn with me. Gwendolyn's going to talk with us. I want her to help us with the fluoridation because she knows in the community what's going on in the families that are the most at need, the poorest families. And then her handcuffs are taken off. We as a private sector have now allowed them to be the person they're supposed to be. Why shouldn't they be allowed to stand up and speak for our health? But if they went and did that on their own, I've had one community here in Florida where they were going to try to stop fluoridation, and the city manager and the mayor looked at that public health person and came in the room and said, this is political, you can't be here. There's nothing right about that. Nothing. That's just wrong. But we make it happen by doing this the right way. Your elected officials, different places are making these decisions. Water councils, water utility boards, health boards, city council, county commissions. This is all made at a local level by some group in different states. Reach out to them. Again, encourage them to be guided by the credible evidence. It doesn't take you long to find out if they're for it or if they're against it or if they have a dog in the fight. And one of the things that you ask them, say, what questions do you have about it? And get quiet. Pregnant pause. Make it 3 pregnant pauses. They'll start talking. And as they talk, you can kind of bring on more information. And if you've got someone there with you from the health department, which you should, they're hearing it. They're able to address it. Now, the other people that are really important with this is their staff. I thought staff meant people like secretarial people. No, their staff are people that are in the water utility department, the building department, the infrastructure department. Those are the people in their different areas that are their experts. When you have water utility folks that are opposed to fluoridation, who do the city decision makers get their information from? That's their expert. They want to know how to build a bridge right. They go to their building department and they get those experts and the science from them. Again, talking to staff, talking to the water utility folks, you're going to find out immediately whether they have a dog in the fight. When I say that, you're going to find out whether or not they are for or against fluoridation. Now, after you meet with these folks, first thing, when it first comes up with the earliest signs, you jump in and you meet with them. Then, again, private sector, listen up. These are hard lessons that I learned along the way. But you send them a thank you note afterwards to them at their email address, public email address. Summarize what you had to talk about, include their position on fluoridation. They say they're against it. Tell them you're going to follow up with anything they need. But you're restating what they said to you. You print out that email. That is a paper trail. And the local newspaper here, largest in the Southeast, that won a Pulitzer Prize, they got to see those emails. That's a way for you to get people on track. What about somebody running for office? We interview them. We want to know what their position is on fluoridation, because that's how we make these things not happen. This is a commissioner here in our county, and she came out with this strong statement after fluoridation coming back. She said that public officials have a responsibility to listen to their constituents. We also have a duty not to allow false fear to drive public health decisions. We should direct our constituents to reputable websites. We shouldn't let, guess what I read on the internet, to be the reason to abandon a proven safe practice like water fluoridation. Sharp lady, and as I told you before, if you're not going to sit in that chair and you let an anti-fluoridation sit there and for 4 hours, 9 hours in Calgary when I was there last October, 9 hours of discussing fluoridation. If we hadn't been there, 6 hours would have been the anti-fluoridationists talking about it. You got to step up. It's outside of our comfort zone. We're not politicians in our health fields, but by God, we have to be, because these people are going to try and stop it all the time. We're not going to let them do it. I did it. I ain't special. Here's the final piece. Ignoring the evidence can have consequences. These 4 people voted it out. Third one over from the left brought his child to my office. He said so in public. Checks in the mail, Dr. Johnson. Well, they voted out on October 4th, 2011. When I say you got to get involved, that's me at the polling place. These 2 people running for office were going to bring fluoridation back. That was the one issue they ran on. 2 on the right side up there, they were running for re-election. On November 27th, after the election, the 2 that won, their first order of business was to vote to restore fluoridation, and they got a 6-1 vote. And we had it back 15 months later. It can be done. And again, the media are your friends. I never wanted to talk to the media, never wanted to give an interview or anything. Scared to death. But I did it. And it gets easier and easier. These guys won a Pulitzer Prize, 10 story series. Your water personnel, you need to go visit a water plant. You need to do that right away. I'm going to tell you something. You're going to find out some things about your water plant that you never would have known. You can eat off the floor of these places. They are so clean. Thank them for providing safe drinking water in this time of our failing infrastructure. They have a tough time, and they don't have to do water fluoridation. They're doing it because not they're required by EPA, but their cities requiring it. And that's why some of them will say that it's not a good thing, because they don't want to do it. We have to be the ones letting them know how well they're doing, and they're stopping 2/3 of the kids from going to the hospital with early childhood caries by simply fluoridating the water. They do the job. I'll tell you what, go in those plants, you're going to be just amazed at how they look and what all they do. Lastly, this guy in Clearwater, Florida, the water director, was doing his best. He's an anti-fluoridationist. I found out through talking with one of the city council members who kind of said to me, I think we got a problem. And I said, your problem is the guy that's the water director. I sat down with him, and the first words out of his mouth was, fluoride is a drug. He was trying to delay fluoridation from starting 4 to 6 years after it should have been started. We got it turned around. I turned him upside down. Last thing, critical and immediate request. Pull your annual water quality report. We sit back when we have fluoridated water, and we're thrilled. We're thrilled that we have it. Do you know what it is really in your water? You don't until you find out on your annual water quality report, and that's online. I know Caro's not in Missouri. I was born in Caro. Usually they have a range. People have a range on their water quality reports that they have to send out every year. But if they only have one date, that's the date that they took it. And that's all right. That's kind of what they report as. They report it to the CDC on a monthly basis. Cape Girardeau, big town to us, 1.01 parts per million. This was last year's 2019 reports. Park Hills, Missouri is on here for a reason. Dr. Dane, Gwen. And if you're still on, Gary, Park Hills retained water fluoridation. Battle. God love them. They got it done. They got it done. And they used all the things that I presented in this presentation. I can't see y'all, and I hope I don't look like an idiot here sitting talking to a screen, but I am just so passionate about this stuff. Just so passionate. Our website has tons of information on it. If you don't know something, ask us. We're here. My email is on the end of this. There's a huge bunch of places to get information, and it takes a village of us to put it together and get it out. I want to thank you for putting up with my rants, my rages, my strain being politically correct at times, but I want to really thank you all, and please don't hesitate to reach out. My private email address is on here. I'm available 24/7. I do this every day of the week. I love it. It's given me a way to practice dentistry without being able to do it with my hands anymore. Thank you all very, very much. And any questions what questions do you have that I may not have gone over?
I'm just waiting to see if we get any questions here in the chat.
That scared me for a second. I thought maybe I was over with. My voice had faded out.
No, you're loud and clear the whole time, Johnny.
Okay.
We do have a comment that by Linda Hoffman that she was going to take the dental hygiene students to the local water department, but they wouldn't allow us due to COVID. And she was wondering why. I imagine they just had the same concerns that you typically run into, is like a big group of people together. They probably don't want to do that, but I don't know. I don't know, Johnny, if you have any comments about that.
Oh yeah, I do. Some water plants, I laugh about it because this one water plant operator had stopped fluoridation 7 years before he brought it to the city council and said, I think we should stop. And I went around and looked at his place, and I said, where's your fluoridation equipment? And he said, right over here, and it was nothing but an empty rack with nothing in it. He'd stopped it and taken the equipment out. You have every right to go in and look at it. They don't want media people in there, but you have every right. If it's truly COVID, it's COVID. If they refuse to you at any other time to go in, Dr. Dane and Gwendolyn can go into any water plant because she can inspect the equipment. You set it up. If they're not wanting to let you do it, let Gwen know. Gwen, we want our class to go take a look at this. Almost all water plant operators are thrilled to show you. They know why you're there. They know that you're going in to see water fluoridation equipment, but just talk about that last. Go look at that last. Tell them you want to see, show an interest. I mean, we don't know all this chemistry and all the stuff they have. It's amazing stuff that's inside these places. And it's just really, really cool. But if they're trying to not let you go in, you're paying their wages, and they have to let the health department go in. So there are times that I've had here it's Sean Isaac, and there it's Gwendolyn Sullentrop. If I pronounce her last name right, Gwen, if you're on it, I apologize. But they've met me at a water plant, and we've gone through, and we've talked to them and gone over everything. So yes, you cannot be denied to go in. If it's COVID related now, benefit of the doubt. When COVID's over with, they don't allow you to do it, you talk to Gwendolyn. You're going in.
Well, along those lines, I just wanted to mention that, and I haven't been on for the entire presentation, so Johnny might have covered this, but the coalition frequently provides support and consultation to local community water fluoridation advocates. We'll set up meetings, we'll make connections. Sometimes we hear from people, the local public health department and dental professionals and just other advocates about an issue, and we make sure we get all those people together so you can work together locally. And the same is true for the Office of Dental Health. Dr. Dane's shop will get in there and help you, just like Johnny was mentioning, Gwen. People are here to help you. You don't have to go at this alone. And I can tell you from experience, such as the experience with Park Hills recently, local people that will get involved in this just make a tremendous difference. And I can tell you the folks down in the Park Hills area felt like, gosh, I don't know how to do this, and I've never done anything like this. And they got in there and they did just a beautiful, beautiful job with making connections. Who knows who can talk to who, what kind of resources can we get together, and you can do that too. It doesn't happen overnight, but you certainly can do that, and we really need you to do that. But we're certainly here to help you with that, as is Dr. Dane's shop. And Johnny's a fantastic resource, and you can see he is just a little bit passionate about this. So he will jump in there and he will help you, and he's very wise about this stuff and experience. So
even a blind hog can find an acorn now and then, Gary. You're lucky. I will have to say one of the funniest cessation attempts ever was in South Dakota, that a chiropractor that was in the legislature was introducing a bill to stop fluoridation, and the state dental director called me. This was back in 2012, and he said, "I heard you helped out Pinellas County get their fluoridation restarted." I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "I'm having a problem." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" And he told me. I said, "Go talk to him. Let him know what goes on." I said, because 3 of the 4 that got voted out of office over it was because of fluoridation, and the 4th one changed his mind, and we had it back 15 months later. He just happened to go to church with the same church that this guy went to. They had a little discussion down on the church parking lot the day before the vote on Monday. Chiropractor withdrew it. I mean, it's you never know what's going to happen. It can happen at the grocery store. The kids go to the same school that your kids go to. They play on the playgrounds. You talk anywhere. I mean, they tell me I would talk to an ant at an intersection in the middle of the desert about fluoridation, and that's pretty accurate. I would, anywhere, anytime, get into it.
And sometimes that can be the conversation that makes all the difference. Linda Hoffman is also mentioning the notification law. I mentioned that at the very beginning, that the coalition worked to pass a very kind of benign piece of legislation that went through without much controversy, although it did take us 4 sessions before we got it through, probably because it's not very important to the legislature. But it simply requires the local water district or the decision makers around that to give the public and the state notice 90 days prior to a discussion at which they were considering discontinuing community water fluoridation. And in fact, they have to do that if they're going to add it too. That wasn't necessarily our intention when we started the discussion, but as it went through committee, that was added. And we don't have a problem with that. The reason we wanted to do that law is because we were having instances where there was little or even no notification that this was even a topic on a city council or county commission agenda, and it would be brought up. The council would go, "Oh, okay," and make the decision right then and there. No public input, no opportunity for public input, no discussion, no nothing. And then we would hear about it later, because they did have to tell Department of Natural Resources that they were no longer going to be regulated for fluoride because they were not adding it anymore. And then we'd hear about it months later. So the bill has worked well. We do hear about it. It's also slowed down anti-momentum because sometimes communities don't remember they have this law and they start to discontinue it, and we're able to step in there and they are reminded, oh no, now you have to back up. You have to give notice before you
Right.
do this, and that can really put some kink in their works there, and that's what you want. There should be good public discourse about a decision
Right.
that's this important and good input. So it works quite well. I mean, you need to be aware of that. If it comes up in a local community for you, yes, they do. They do have to provide that notification. Yes, and Max Taylor has made a comment. For anyone who thinks their fluoridation is in jeopardy, please reach out to your state's dental association if they should be chomping at the bit to help, as they should be chomping at the bit to help out. Missouri Association really threw its weight behind some of the fights in our state and was a major benefit. Yeah, I would actually say it's not uncommon when one of these battles, one of these local controversial battles come up for the coalition and the Office of Dental Health and the Missouri Dental Association to have quite a bit of communication around that and try to get the word out. We work really hard to try to get local people involved. One of the first things we do is, do we have any members in the area that's being affected, and then reach out to them to see if they would become involved. And so, that becomes very, very important. So I very much appreciate the comment there, Dr. Taylor.
Let me also add that sometimes the only advance notice or real quick advance notice you get will be a letter to the editor in the newspaper where somebody says, I think that we no longer need to have fluoridation. It's this or it's that. Or it's a conversation with a neighbor over a back fence. Honest to God, any little thing like that, when you hear about it, it's already a ball that's rolling down the hill. It is already going. So be aware of it. Let the Hygiene Association know, Dental Association, fire it up to Dr. Dane, Gwen, Oral Health Coalition. Everybody jump in with both feet, and you've got a rapid response team to get going with it. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. And, lots of people will get involved in these battles. I think lots of local people, and it's really very helpful. And I think the issue we had come up in Columbia several years ago was kind of, by my mind, kind of quintessentially handled well. They had dentists and hygienists and pediatricians and students and teachers and the county health board members, and I mean, just anybody you could imagine came out in support of continuing community water fluoridation. And boy, it really makes a difference. It makes it very hard for in this case, the city council to go forward with that. And that worked so well. The city councilwoman that had called for the motion to discontinue fluoridation voted against her own call. That's how well that worked. It was unanimously defeated. So that broader involvement is very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Well, Dr. Dane says thank you for a great presentation, and Diane says yes, we should all work together on this issue, and that's absolutely true. And Ashley has sent me a text to tell you all that the CE Zoom code for CEUs is fluoridation, and that's all lowercase. So you will need that to get your CEUs, fluoridation. And I don't know if Ashley is still on, but I don't really have insight as to the mechanisms for securing the CEUs, other than I do need to tell you that you have to have that code. So it's fluoridation, all lowercase.
Spell it.
I'm
not kidding.
Oh yeah, FLUORIDATION. You will find your fingers when you type it want to spell flower,
It,
L-O-U-R, but it's Fluoridation.
sadly,
So,
I've had presentations where the computer corrected me and I didn't realize it. It spelled fluoridation. I mean, the antis do that on purpose, and I'm up there. I'm going, don't lose it, Johnny. I know better than that. So, thanks, Gary.
yeah,
Well, the
well, thank you.
presentation is certainly welcome. Everyone is welcome to have it. It's not secret information. The antis have it, and there's nothing they can do to dispute it. These are the facts. It is the way it is. So we are happy to share anything we have and help at any time.
We will make a recording of this available to everyone who has attended today, so that will go out probably in a few days. If you have questions about CEUs, shoot us an email, and we'll get back to you. And are any other questions? I think we're a little bit over time, not too much. I applaud Johnny not only for an outstanding presentation and discussion, but also for his ability to edit himself, because I think he probably could continue talking about this for many more hours. So I'm very pleased we're only a few minutes over.
Thank you.
All right. Well, any final words? Okay. Well, thank you all very much. Have a great evening. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Thank you.